So far, this approach is really focused on the text, like the poem on the page. But to continue this conversation, let's start to look outside of the poem at some of the context. You could just appreciate and work with the poem itself, just the words on the page. But if we go outside of those lines, outside of the page, and look at the context the poem is coming from, we can gain a little bit more insight about it. Think about it again, as we're having this conversation with the poet and they're communicating. What if we know a little bit more of their background, a little bit more about them? What they're trying to say to us might make a little bit more sense. So, thinking about William Carlos Williams in this poem, Spring Storm, I have this attitude of curiosity as I'm approaching the poem. And I looked up William Carlos Williams. I went to poets.org. I Googled him. I tried to find some information. This seemed like a pretty short and to the point summary of his life. I've included a little bit of it here. So it says he's from New Jersey. He's American. He started writing poetry in high school, and he became a writer and a doctor. And I think that really influences, maybe not this poem as much. Maybe we'll get into that. But especially a lot of his other poetry is about his life as a doctor. But something else that stood out to me here is this line about he was one of the principal poets. He was the main poets in the Imagist movement. So I decided to look that up too. I clicked through, curious, what's the Imagist movement? And it says a lot of stuff here about other movements, Romanticism, Victorian poetry. But I really thought this line was important. It says, Imagism emphasized simplicity, clarity of expression, and precision through the use of exacting visual images. Like they wanted to be pretty simplistic, clear, but precise through visual imagery. Continuing, it says, they don't want all the abstract stuff. They want to kind of replace some of the loose abstract parts of poetry with concrete details, really like hard, clear facts. So it says they're short, they're usually free verse, and they were image focused. I like this line on the bottom. It says, they want to get down to what this Hlum called the hard, dry image, which when I go back to Spring Storm, I think knowing a little bit more about William Carlos Williams and what he was writing about and when he was writing and kind of what people were talking about at that time, this to me has a lot of those Imagist ideas in here. It's fairly straightforward. It's fairly clear. And it's really trying to paint a clear image of a spring storm. Again, we could get into more of it. We can get into the figurative language, but I think knowing that he was one of these Imagist poets makes me think a lot of this could just be trying to paint this clear, precise picture of what does it actually look like when melting ice cuts lines through kind of the grass below it. And I think having that background about the poet, having this context helps me appreciate maybe what he's doing here a little bit more. So overall, part of this attitude, part of this approach means being curious, looking into the person, looking into some of these things we might not be sure about and getting that context.